In the year 101 AD, the Roman Emperor Trajan faced an immense problem. To his east, a rising power threatened trade and influence in the Roman world and the empire's position in the Balkan Peninsula. The newly rebuilt kingdom of Dacia, led by its king Decebalus, stood in opposition to complete Roman hegemony in the Balkans and posed an existential threat to the empire. Trajan was a military man, forged in the conquests of the early empire, and it would be under his reign and supervision that Rome's imperial territory would reach its absolute height. His strategic insights and administrative capabilities, in hindsight, were not wrong. He was right to fear the rising power of the Dacians and to fear the ambitions of their leader, Decebalus. Decebalus, like Trajan, was a military man. He had gained fame and power by reconstituting the power of the Dacian kingdom, and gained immense wealth by defeating the Roman army of Domitian, which was sent to attack his kingdom in the year 85 AD. The resulting treaty provided Decebalus with enough gold and material wealth that not only could refine his forces, but he was able to build great cities and even begin to model his army after the Romans. The Dacian army that Decebalus started with was not much different from the barbarian tribes the Romans were used to fighting, just with some extra horse attachments to augment their strength. With his new wealth, Decebalus began to create a bigger, better trained, and better equipped army. The rapid growth of the Dacian cities also helped with resource extraction. Dacia had large deposits of gold, iron, and other raw materials, making the kingdom very, very wealthy. When word reached Trajan that Decebalus could muster 250,000 soldiers, had created engines of war, and had gained access to technologies on par with the Romans, he realized that conflict was inevitable, and the longer he waited, the stronger Dacia would become. Understanding that his long-term goal would be against the Parthians, and that a potential alliance between the two powers could be a potent and potentially dangerous arrangement, Trajan made the call to invade Dacia. In the year 101, Trajan departed Italy with his army and invaded Dacia from the west. Trajan brought with him his best generals, including someone named Hadrian, which I don't know, may become important later on for the history of the Roman Empire, but who knows? His army advanced in two columns, each following their own rivers, the Danube and the Drobeta, respectively. They each followed their own lines of advance without receiving much, if any, pushback from the Dacians. This held true until the Third Battle of Tepe, which saw them defeating Decebalus' army, but not without sustaining major casualties. Trajan decided that he would create a series of forts here and would winter in the region, hoping to put pressure on Sarmizegetusa and force Decebalus into a peace deal. Decebalus had figured that this was Trajan's plan, and decided in the winter to attack south into the Roman province of Moesia Inferior. Decebalus moved his army and his allies, the Roxolani, across the Danube and into Roman territory. There, they were met with stiff resistance by the Roman general and governor Manius Maximus. Trajan had anticipated Decebalus' move and had placed a strong force under the capable governor's command. Decebalus and his armies were stopped, and his force was driven back into Dacian territory. The defeat in Moesia also saw the capture of Decebalus' sister, which obviously was terrible for morale of the Dacians. Trajan waited until March to launch another assault into the kingdom. His armies advanced in 3 columns, all with one goal: reach Sarmizegetusa. The columns all advanced at a methodical pace, and one by one, the famed citadels of Dacia fell to the Romans. Seeing the writing on the wall, Decebalus agreed to a peace settlement. The treaty was as follows. Dacia had to accept Roman garrisons across the kingdom, including a large one in the capital city of Sarmizegetusa. They had to return Roman deserters and turn over all of their war machines. They needed to cede some territory along the Danube, and they had to now give up their own foreign policy and instead submit themselves into Rome's orbit. Essentially, Dacia was now turned into a client kingdom of Rome. However, much to the surprise of the Dacians and to many of the Romans, Trajan began to send money and materials to Dacia to help Decebalus rebuild. His intention was for the kingdom to be a strong, allied buffer kingdom between Rome and the barbarian-inhabited lands to the north. While this was in theory a wonderful idea, the reality is that Decebalus just used all the material to enrich the kingdom once again and prepare for a rebellion against Roman rule. This rebellion occurred not long after, in the year 105, when all of a sudden, all Roman fortified positions across Dacia came under siege. Trajan was slow to respond to the rebellion, given that he had no reason to believe that one was even imminent. And while Trajan was trying to create a coherent plan for how to respond to the invasion, Decebalus attacked into Roman territory, though we know from accounts from the time that these did not go well. At the beginning of 106, Trajan, now having prepared himself, led a massive Roman invasion into Dacia. While Decebalus threw his armies at the Romans, inflicting heavy casualties, they continued their advance until they finally reached Sarmizegetusa and laid siege to the kingdom's capital. The siege was long and brutal, but eventually the kingdom's capital was indeed captured. The Dacians refused to surrender and instead continued to hold out in their large forts and citadels, and Decebalus fled north, attempting to preserve and reconstitute his war effort in the Carpathian Mountains. But he and his generals were caught by the Romans. He chose to take his own life rather than surrender, and his head was brought to Trajan. While the Roman armies continued to mop up resistance, the Second Dacian War was effectively over, and so was the kingdom. Rome annexed most of Dacia and let the rest fall away into the barbarian lands to the north. The parts of the kingdom that Rome annexed, in particular the old heartland of the kingdom, would go on to become the province of Dacia in the Roman Empire. Unlike most conflicts from that period of time, we actually have really good accounts of what happened in the Dacian Wars. In 113 AD, Trajan built what we call Trajan's Column, as a way to commemorate and celebrate his victory over the Dacians. It still stands today in Rome, and it was because of all the details and the depictions and all the Latin script that was added to the column that we know so much about the campaigns. Well, the kingdom of Dacia was now gone, banished into the history books. The new, complete Roman occupation of Dacia was just beginning. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lesser Known History. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.